Hello, and thank you so much for joining live today for this Life in Canada session. As an international student myself, because I was an international student at the University of Toronto, I know that transitioning to a new country and culture and academic environment can be pretty exciting and daunting. Of course, everyone's experiences will be unique with distinct challenges and opportunities, but we wanted to take some time today to give some advice that students before you, including ourselves, have found helpful, and also give you some resources in case you'd like some help down the road. First of all, who is this person talking at you? My name is Tyler Cousin. I'm the Student Life Officer with the International Programs Office. If you didn't see the video that we posted yesterday, I've been working with Todd to put together this entire orientation for new college international students and as well as international foundation program students. And we're really excited to be with you here today. So, today's goals. First, we'd like to summarize cultural transition a bit, but I'll do my best to keep it from being too boring. This is actually a field with a lot of study and not just about students, but migrants in general. But I'll try my best to make it relatable and brief so you can understand what's going on and also you don't leave the chat. Great. We will then reflect on ourselves as unique individuals and try to anticipate how a new environment will affect us and try to get ahead of any concerns that we may see coming. Finally, we all need support sometimes. I know I do. I know I did as an international first year. And in a new place, it can be difficult to find those supports. So we'll explore some options. I know that not all of you are in Canada right now, or will necessarily be coming this semester or maybe this academic year. However, there will still absolutely be a transition experience virtually, and someday, hopefully, we will be all back on campus again, and we'll do our best to make sure that this content today is relevant to everyone. But if anyone has any questions about their particular circumstances, feel free to type the questions in the chat. I'll also answer them if I can. And at the very end of the presentation, there'll also be a form where you can submit your questions after the session. They can be anonymous if you like, or you can attach your name to them, and we'll do our best to support you. There will also be a chance, So let's get started with some of the self-reflection. So who is in the room? Oh, okay. So I'm actually going to do a poll. So on your screen, you will see a bunch of poll questions that will come very shortly. Please answer quickly and we'll just fly through all 5 of them. I just want to kind of get a sense of who's here. All right, so the first question is, have you been to Canada before? So for have you been to Canada before, 43% of you said yes, 58% of you said no. All right, do you have friends or family who have attended a university? So that means, do you have anyone very close to you that's already been to university that you can kind of rely on to learn about what it's like? Most of you had yes, but there are definitely some students who don't, and that's fair. And I'll explain why we're answering all of these questions after we've done them, don't worry. So, is this your first time attending an English-speaking institution? So, is this the first time you're in school where the main language and the primary language is English? Amazing. So 23% of you said yes, and 77% of you said no. Now, do you have any friends or family already in Canada? I imagine this one's going to be a lot more split. And 58% of you do have some friends and family in Canada, 43% of you don't. So it's quite an even split. Would you feel comfortable starting a conversation with a domestic student? So let's say someone who speaks English as their first language, like, would you feel comfortable, like today, if I asked you to just start a conversation with someone out of the blue about anything, would you be okay with that, or would that be kind of nervous, make you kind of nervous? So 79% of you said you would be comfortable, 21 said you wouldn't. And honestly, that's a really high result for those of you who are comfortable. I know that just based on the research in international student fields and being an international student in your first year, usually that's one of the things that many students say they have a lot of nerves about and they find quite scary. And I know I did to meet a whole bunch of new people, and a bunch of my fellow students did. So there's definitely validity in being worried about that. So the reason why we ask these questions is whether or not you've been to Canada can have a huge impact on your comfort level with being here, obviously. Whether or not you have anyone who's been to university before can be a support factor. So those can be people you rely on or don't have to rely on to learn about what university is like, and they can kind of guide you or not. Having attended an English speaking learning institution before, it's not hard to imagine why that would be relevant to your experience at U of T. Whether or not you have people close to you in Canada can obviously be a potential source of support. And then finally, what I said about being comfortable speaking to domestic students kind of gauges where you are personally. We spent a little bit, oh goodness. Am I still here? I just got a notification that my internet cut out.
You're still here for me?
Okay, good, sorry. Okay, now that we've gone through some questions, I wanna say that many of you answered differently for each one. And it's good to reflect on what supports and options you may have and which ones you may not have at the current moment. If you went through the entire list and felt like every one of your answers meant things will be harder for you, you're not the only student, I promise you. Being an international student has its own challenges. And now that we have an idea of what some of these challenges might look like, because we just kind of answered yes or no for them, we may or may not, we have some ways to approach those challenges and know which supports we can reach out to. Now that we've spent a little bit of time thinking about ourselves and our own situation, let's think about where we're going. First, on a large scale, Canada. So now, what do you think of when you hear the phrase Canadian culture? I know that's a thing that you've definitely heard before, or culture of many countries. So let me know in the chat. It can be a single word, it can be a sentence, it can be a person, absolutely anything. The more you submit, the better. So take like 30 seconds and let me know. Feel free to submit as much as you like. Just let me know. What do you think of when you hear Canadian culture? All right, hockey, Raptors, kind, ice hockey and maple syrup, friendly, nice people, super nice, maple syrup. People are friendly. I'm really glad we're so friendly. Maple syrup, politeness, ice hockey, friendly. Tea culture from the UK. Interesting, Drake. Yes, from Toronto too. Raptors, dual languages, English and French. Diversity, I'm just picking out ones that haven't been said. Have particular customs, multicultural, snow, absolutely, snow does happen. Kindness, yeah, so great. So these are some of the very popular conceptions of Canadian culture. Now, no need to answer this in the chat, but a follow-up question. Have any of your experiences personally reinforced these things that you see in the chat, whether they be the kindness or the maple syrup or whatever it is? You don't need to type this out, but is this something that you've experienced or just something that you heard, yes or no? Likely, some of you will say yes and no to different things depending what it is, and that's totally normal. The reality is that a lot of these things are general and may be true sometimes, but maybe not always, and it really, really depends on the context. For example, something funny that I learned when I moved to Canada as an international student was that the niceness stereotype of Canadians is totally true, at least in my perspective. I moved here from France and then America, and compared to Florida, where I lived before, like people are so nice here. But when I was speaking to other Canadians, they actually let me know that Torontonians, which is where obviously U of T is, are really rude. In the Canadian context, Torontonians are seen as like the rude Canadians, the people that are too busy to help you out. Whereas if you go somewhere that's maybe a smaller town in Canada, they consider themselves to be the actually nice Canadians, which I always found really interesting. But the whole point of why I'm mentioning this is that to reinforce that point, that it really depends on the context of what it is that the stereotype means and whether or not it's actually even true. The reality is that it's not really that simple. Whether we're talking about Raptors or Jays or Drake, not everybody likes the Raptors. Not everybody likes Drake. Not everybody likes all of these things. Just like in the country where you're living right now, or the state, or wherever you happen to be, it's going to be all over the place. But there's definitely some things that we all think of when we hear Canada. So this one, feel free to write in the chat. what is the most Canadian thing that you've ever experienced? If you don't have anything, that's cool. But if you can think of something Canadian that you think you've experienced, whatever you think that means, feel free to write it out. This is a bit of a harder one because it totally depends on how you interpret the question. Someone went to a Raptors game and ate maple syrup. That is a very Canadian day. No lie. that's just true. UBC, Tim Hortons. Yeah. Thanksgiving, October. Yep. That was confusing for me too. Co-op program, ice wine. Great. And so why I wanted to ask that question is because depending on Drake's Views album, great album, in my opinion. So depending on who you're speaking to in Canada, the reality is that some people might not even consider some of these things Canadian. Like Tim Hortons in certain parts of Canada isn't that popular. Out west, for example, Tim Hortons isn't nearly as popular as it is out here. UBC, talk to someone in Montreal and they'll say McGill is better. It really depends. Some people will say Views is not a good album. It really, really depends. And why I'm asking these kinds of weird questions is because I want to kind of explain again that our perception of what is Canadian may not always be what someone else's perception of what is Canadian, whether or not they're Canadian themselves. Now, another way to break down the idea of Canadian culture, because this can be really daunting for a lot of people, is what subgroups or parts of Canadian culture can you think of? So if you think of Canadian culture, what kind of parts of it can you imagine? I'll give you a hint. If you're here today with me, you're already a part of a bunch of them. Like I can think of 3 off the top of my head that you already are a part of yourself. Great. Someone put diversity. Yeah, absolutely. We have students from all over the place here today. Multicultural. So try to think of like groups of people. So I'm going to give you an example. All of you here are students, and students are absolutely a subgroup within a culture, right? Students typically don't act the same as like adults who are working professional jobs or children, even like infants. So what subgroups, like little groups of people, or sometimes they're big, like obviously there's a lot of students, can you think of within the Canadian culture? A lot of these exist within every culture. Professors, yeah. Timbermen, yeah, that's a really classic Canadian one. People who cut down trees. Migrants, Anglophones, Francophones, Indigenous peoples, absolutely. Athletes, people of color, absolutely, absolutely. All of these are completely correct. Great. So these are all subgroups within the Canadian cultures. Immigrants, for example, is another subgroup, and there's others. So now obviously we all have different cultural expectations of students compared to working professionals or small children and babies. This is also to say that while culture is absolutely something we perceive and experience, it's also really varied depending on what subgroups you may or may not be a part of and what your participation adds to it. That might sound a little weird. What am I adding to culture? But the reality is, you as a student at U of T are now changing Canadian culture every day. You're a part of it. Culture doesn't just magically change, the people within it change it. So if you can think of, let's say, the last 10 years as an example, a lot has changed culturally, right? Social media has had absolutely affected culture across the world, for example. How and why did culture change? In part through the participation such as yours. For example, if one of the students here today gets really popular on social media in Canada specifically, and they always say a catchphrase in their show, and that becomes a part of pop culture in Canada, that is you affecting culture. Obviously, that's a very big example, but the reality is that just your participation at U of T the way you engage with yourself, the things you're interested in, the things you do, that in itself affects culture. So it's not that culture is constantly affecting you, you also affect it in your own ways. So it's kind of a give and take relationship, which is something I wanted to point out because a lot of times students feel that they are only being told what to do and they don't necessarily see how they themselves are participating. Cool. So Canadian culture has changed a lot over time, as we talked about. Great. Now the same question. When you hear the phrase U of T culture, so the University of Toronto culture, what do you think of? What reputation do you think the university has? U of Tears. I'll explain that in a bit. I actually have a sweater that says U of Tears. Um, U of Tears is calling back to how some students obviously feel that it's really difficult. Rigorous was here, great work ethic, but it's absolutely a very high academic standard, like Arian just said. So the joke U of Tears came about. Competitive, yes. Harvard of the North, I've heard that many times. Diversity, competitive, boundless. Amazing. Huge. Yeah, it's pretty big. Amazing. So not only does Canada have its cultures of its own that change and shift, but U of T does too. And just like Canada, U of T's culture has groups. And an easy way to think of an example is looking at the colleges. So since you're here, you're all a member of New College. New College has its particular focuses and values, and its students have their own focuses and values as well. While these are obviously incredibly diverse based on how many students there are, whatever may be the reason, it differs from the cultures of other colleges like Innis, Trinity, University College, and so on. Each college has its own experience, culture, lessons, opportunities, and more. Reflecting on that, I'd like you to answer these questions in the chat. You can send these to everybody, or maybe just only send them to me if you're shy. What is something that you're excited about and something that you're worried about? Cool. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of really great things. So a lot of people seem to be excited about meeting new people. A lot of individuals seem to be worried about the academic rigor. Many people seem excited about the new experiences. Some are worried about the bell curve and the workload. Excited about, oh, some people are excited and worried about the same things, whether they be meeting new people, academics, and winter. Amazing. Excited about living in a different new country, but nervous about those challenges. All of these are absolutely perfectly fair. And what you'll see if you look through is that one, a bunch of people are excited about the same things or nervous about the same things. And some people are excited about one thing and another person is worried about that exact same thing. And what I kind of want to get out of this is the reality that we're not alone in this. If we're all here today, there's 50 people in this conversation. That's 50 people who are now here, hopefully able to support one another down the road. Okay. I hope you see that there's a huge array of things. People agreed, people are disagreed about what they're excited or not excited about. But I know that my fellow international students in my first year were excited about meeting new people. And I know I was pretty worried about it. And hopefully knowing this makes you feel a little bit more okay with being excited or nervous about what it is you are. And hopefully the sessions today and the sessions for the next 2 weeks help address those fears or that excitement and help make you feel more prepared and ready for the first days of class that are coming up. Now, what happens to these emotions, our excitement and our worry, as we transition to another culture? Okay, let's talk about that. So, raise your hand to answer. What does this model propose about cultural transition? If someone would like to speak at this part, this is probably one of the few times that that's possible. If you raise your hand, I'll be able to see, and then you can unmute yourself and we'll see what you think. All right, I see any raised hands. Anyone can raise their hand. On Zoom, because it's hard to kind of check everyone's pictures really quickly. So if you click the raise hand function, that would be better. If everyone's feeling nervous or too tired to talk, that's also perfectly fine. I'm not going to force you. All right, I'll give it a few more seconds. All right, so I'll talk about it. That's perfectly fine. So, cultural transition. So, what this model, which is a model based on various studies from around the world, proposes is that when we transition to another country, there's at first a honeymoon period, which is a nice way to say, like, we're really excited, we're really happy, everything seems beautiful. And then maybe it goes down, 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 down. We hit the bottom, which is called culture shock, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And then we adjust and then we adapt. The reality is that for many students, this may be the experience. This doesn't happen to everyone, but culture shock is very much a real thing. You may have heard this term before, maybe not, but culture shock is an experience that many international students and others have. It's possible that you can even go to the city next door to your hometown and have culture shock then. You don't even need to move countries. It's actually quite simple to achieve. When one does have culture shock, it often looks like this. Now, looks like this exact curve. Now we're getting a little academic. Does anyone want to raise their hand and tell me what they, oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm having tech issues again. Okay, so yes, at first you might feel great. Everything is all new and cool, and eventually, however, new and cool might start to feel different and wrong. New and cool is great for a while, that's the honeymoon period, but when you want the comforts of things that you're used to and maybe the things that you've had for your entire life, those things, those new and cool things, maybe don't feel so great anymore. And that is not only normal, but totally fair. The reality is that if, for example, every single morning you've had the exact same thing for breakfast your entire life, or at least the past few years, just as an example, and suddenly you're eating in the cafeteria and trying new things every day. I know when I was in my first year living in residence, suddenly my breakfast became pizza like that. Suddenly, every morning I was just eating pizza. Probably not the best decision. But after a while, I started to miss the things I would do back home, the people I would see back home. And that pizza that I at first loved during the honeymoon period became part of the problem. Suddenly I started hating the pizza, or I started hating the cafeteria in general, or resenting my new reality because the honeymoon period was over. And the reality was I was kind of descending into my own experience of cultural shock. It looks different for everyone. It sometimes doesn't happen at all. Sometimes it's really light, and sometimes it's pretty serious. But what we need to focus on with something like this is accepting the fact that this very well may happen, but also looking for supports and looking for resources that we'll talk about in a little bit that will help us get through it and get past it. Now, this can be in the chat, but after having described this a little bit, do you think you will experience culture shock? You don't need to answer this in the chat. I'm not going to make you out yourself like that. You can if you want. But, oh, a bunch of you are admitting yes. Of course. Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. I love the honesty. I wasn't expecting you to have to kind of be so kind of forthcoming. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Thank you. Absolutely. So it's very, very possible. Maybe some of you who are saying yes won't. But at the same time, absolutely, it's really, really, really possible. I see that a couple people have said to weather alone. Yes. We'll talk about that a little bit more later down the road in another session. But weather is an absolutely huge factor. I experienced my first real winter here, and boy, was it difficult. I definitely took some time to adjust, but that adjustment does happen. And with the supports and the right winter jacket, it's amazing how much easier it gets. The right winter jacket. I cannot say that enough. The right winter jacket. All right, cool. Great. Okay. So now that we've talked about what these cultural experiences are, let's look at them a little bit more closely. A lot of things may change, and maybe this isn't everything, but here are some major components. So, okay. So cultural transition. For you, a big question that'll happen is what has actually changed? You'll have to investigate what has actually changed, what is not the same as it used to be. What changes do you think will have the most impact on you? You can answer this in the chat, or you can just answer this for yourself. But try to reflect on this at least for yourself. What resources, strengths will you have, and what will you use to respond to this change? How do you think you will respond? Do you think you'll do really well with the change? Do you think it's going to be fine? Do you think it'll be really difficult? Again, answer this for yourself or in the chat. It's all up to you. And then finally, what you can do now. This is probably the biggest question and probably the reason why you're here today. What can you do now? And we will absolutely be talking about that. Part of what you're doing right now, which is actually really good, is that you're asking these questions. Just accepting the fact and knowing the fact that things are going to change and it might be a little bit difficult is likely to make your life a bit easier. It's a lot less scary when things change when you see it coming. All right, great. So now we're going to investigate what it is that's changing. Food, weather, culture, sticker shock. Oh yeah, true. Prices are going to be different. Residents, weather. A lot of weather. Language, of course. Yeah, absolutely. So these are all incredibly valid. And we're going to break down cultural change a little bit more now because we've been talking about it as abstract. But I want to kind of dive into what it is actually changes. So your routines. This is a really, really, really big one that a lot of students don't necessarily take into account. I know I didn't as much as I could have. And some people do, but it's one that really, really changes. Your routines will shift dramatically in high school compared to university. When potentially you're living in residence or on your own, or maybe you're still living with your family, your routines will likely change. If you're living with your family in another country and the time zone is very different, guess what? Studying at night is going to be a huge routine change. Or if you're here, waking up really early for a morning class could be a big routine change. Whatever it is, university study almost always means routine change. Reactions. So this really means how you're going to react to everything, right? It's as simple as that. Whether it's the routines, whether it's the weather, whether it's the food, whatever it is that you're experiencing culturally, your reactions are probably going to change. Your relationships will change. You're going to have new relationships with professors, but a professor and student relationship is probably pretty different from the relationship with, oh, people can draw. How is this happening? That's cool. I don't know how that's happening. Cool. So your relationships are absolutely going to change. The reality is that you're going to have different relationships with your Don, different relationships with your fellow students, different relationships with your professors. And this is going to be an absolute change for you. All right. Roles. All right. You will no longer be a high school student. You're going to be a university student. What that means could depend on what program you're in, depending on if you're a brother, sister, son, daughter, if you're an uncle or aunt maybe to a nephew or niece, whatever your roles might be, if you were previously working professionally somewhere, all of these might change, and that is encapsulated in the cultural change you will experience. And then finally, reflections. This is entirely up to you, but how much you do or don't reflect on all of these things. So how you think about it, when you think about it, and when you have time to do these kinds of things. All right. So I've made you talk a whole lot about yourself, and so I'm going to give you a little bit of a break. Thank you so much for all of your honesty. It's been really refreshing, to be completely honest. But now I'll talk about myself. So I'm Tyler, like I said earlier. If you caught my video yesterday, I like to do triathlon. That's kind of the sport I do for fun. So that's a picture of me with my practice bike. It's fast. I like it a lot. I go Zoom. It makes me happy. It's how I get out of the city. The picture in the middle is my dog, Peanut. He is not next to me right now. He's probably somewhere in this apartment. He's the best. I got him as a puppy, and I raised him to be a therapy dog. So when we're back on campus, and gosh, I hope that's soon, depending on how the world goes. But when we're back on campus, he actually comes to the office sometimes to help meet students and be a therapy dog because he's trained as a therapy dog, and he loves meeting people. So hopefully someday he will not just be a photo on your screen, but potentially a lovely little creature in front of you. And then finally, bread. Not just bread, but all food. My family ran restaurants growing up, so I had a bunch of chefs in my family, and I'm French, so like obviously food matters to me because it had to culturally. So food is a huge thing for me, and anyone who does a lot of cardio and a lot of running knows that carbs are the greatest thing in the world. And I love carbs, and I love making bread, and that's bread that I made that I'm pretty proud of actually. So I'm not just randomly showing you photos of myself, I promise. There is a point to all of this. And the point is, so because it matters to you, your identities and interests. So for yourself, again, you can write this in the chat because a lot of you have, which is wonderful, or you cannot. But what are important elements of your identity today? When you think of yourself, when I, for example, think of Tyler in the last slide, how do it is? For example, when I thought of Tyler, this is what I thought of. I'm like, oh, I do exercise for fun because it helps keep me calm. I have a dog, that's dope, and I love food. So for you, what do you imagine for yourself? What elements of your identity do you picture? And then reflecting on the graph that we just looked at in the other slide, how do you see them being affected by these changes in your daily life? Whether you're waking up at a new time, whether you're going to bed at a new time, whether you're studying way more than you used to, whether you have new relationships that you need to balance, whether your roles have changed, whatever it is that we talked about in that graph with the cultural change, how do you see them being affected? And the same question goes to what are your current interests and hobbies? And what can you do to help retain them during all of these changes? So the reality is that who you think of as yourself is obviously going to change, right? If you think to 5 years ago, so when you were 12, 13, 14, whatever, if I asked you to draw yourself and get 3 pictures of yourself when you were that age, and I asked you to do that today, I'm willing to bet that it's probably going to be a little bit different. I know that when I was like a little kid, I would have put like Yu-Gi-Oh as like one of my photos, and I don't think I'd put Yu-Gi-Oh now. Like it's just not a thing anymore. And the same thing is going to happen during university. That's just the reality of life. And so what I want you to think about right now, whether you're telling us or not, is who you think you are and what you want to do and what you want to work on to either maintain it or expand it and grow it and change along with your circumstances. Your interests and hobbies, the things that you're really interested in, like you like doing, how are you going to do that during university with all of these changes? And now, if you'd like to share, because honestly, this is huge. Like I'm saying it over and over again because it's quite important. What you do to retain these things is difficult and also really important. So if anybody has any ideas of what they like to do and what they're going to do to keep it, sorry, I hurt my finger this morning. So what you like to do to keep it, feel free to type it in the chat because maybe your idea of how to maintain your hobby can help someone else. For example, someone is really excited about skiing and they're interested in skiing because they can't do that in Brazil. Yeah, guess what? There's a lot of skiing here. There's a lot of people ski. So that's totally an option and a thing you can do. Work out, yes. So that's a thing people want to do. And League of Legends, great game. Where can I buy that nice bread? I made that nice bread, but there are very good bakeries in the city. If you want to know more about bakeries, talk to me about it. I care too much about this. Cool. So I'm seeing a lot of things: working out, cooking, League of Legends, skiing. So I see joining a respective club for the hobby as a way of maintaining it. That's be great. What other ideas do we have for how to maintain our interests and hobbies or even our identities? So I see joining a club. Any other ideas of how to maintain? Because that's a good one. Absolutely a good one. But clubs are also more time. Like clubs take a lot of time. All right, join New College's dragon boating team. Absolutely, they're very good. I believe they won nationals a bunch of times in a row now. Also, you get ripped. If you see those boaters, oh goodness, they're strong. Dragon boating, if you don't know what that is, it's a long boat and they row really hard and really fast, and they're very strong. It's amazing. What is with Canadians and dragon boating? I don't know. I'm not Canadian either. Don't ask me. I love that. I don't know. Um, Sparing some free time to do what you like. Absolutely. So, from Jeanette, that's a great point. If you actively make time for the things that matter to you, that's a great habit to get into and a really good thing. So far we have carving out the time, making sure we have the time for particular things, and joining clubs. Just to kind of give you some, your relationships are going to change, like I said. Potentially, you could actively try to meet people, whether it's in a club or not, who are also into the same things. I mean, obviously, this happens naturally in daily life. Usually, you have things in common with your friends, but not only have those friends, but like actively pursue those items with those friends. For example, when I moved here, I knew I had friends who liked swimming, but I made the mistake of not being like, hey, let's go swimming. That's a thing you should do. Make sure that with your friends, you're not just maybe playing or doing something that you don't really care about. Try to actively do things that you do enjoy. Great. Oh, fixing this. Any other ideas? No? That's fine. The reality is you're going to figure this out for yourself. Everyone's method of maintaining their identity and interests and hobbies is really unique to them. I know that a bunch of my hobbies and interests kind of took a pause during university. And in retrospect, looking back, I kind of wish I hadn't paused certain ones, but also I was really busy and in school, and U of Tears is a thing. So there were a lot of reasons why I couldn't do certain things. But now I'm getting back into certain ones like triathlon. And so it's really up to you what your experience looks like. Obviously, with all of these cultural changes and all of these roles and expectations, your time is probably going to go down and it's going to feel like you have less control, but you do have some. It's just a matter of where you decide to put your priorities. And I would highly recommend, obviously, reaching out to supports that we're going to talk about in a moment if you feel overwhelmed. Okay, so let's talk about this. Building your community. So we've talked about meeting people and sports and all that fun stuff. So the benefits of building your community. Let's just talk about it abstractly. So you now have a support network. You can maybe get leadership experience. You can maybe learn more about careers down the road, since that's the reason many of us, not all of us, but many of us are in university in the first place. And succeeding as a student, which is, I hope, the reason why we're all in university. Hopefully we all want to succeed. Now, these are ways you can actually do these things. New college student life. So we're going to have a bunch of sessions with people who know more about new college student life than I do, that's for sure. Like your head peer leaders, which are those who run orientation. We're going to have sessions with upper year students, and we're going to have sessions with people who are in student unions and clubs. So that's the next one, student unions and clubs. So some people said maintaining interests and hobbies through that. That's absolutely an option. Just so you know what a student union is, because I didn't when I got here. Let's say you're taking mathematics at U of T. A student union would be like a mathematics student union. So students from that faculty or that field of study make a club together to represent their own interests. Study groups, kind of like a student union, but not as formal. If you just want to study with a bunch of friends, whether they're in your program or not, that is a really great way to get some leadership experience, potentially a support network, hopefully get some success, a whole bunch of things. And then finally, the Center for International Experience is absolutely a service, and we will talk about what that really is next. All of these things, though, are on a thing I'd love for you to learn today called the co-curricular record on CLNX. Okay, so what the co-curricular record is like your resume. So if you've applied to a job before, or you know about the job application process in Canada, you'll know that people will often ask for a resume, which is really just a list of your experiences and your qualifications. Obviously, not all of our experiences and qualifications are professional. Like being part of a club, leading an organization, volunteering for an event. Some of that is amazing experience, but not all of that you can exactly fit on your resume. And sometimes you can't really prove it on your resume. That's why U of T created this, the CCR. Essentially, what this is whenever there's an opportunity on the Career Learning Network, which is our big website that I'll talk about in a moment, whenever there's an opportunity there, there may be an opportunity to have it proven on your co-curricular record. So for example, in the International Foundation Program, whenever I get volunteers for programs, I make sure that after whatever that is, after the event or after the year, all of the students who participated get notes and get credit on their co-curricular record. So down the road, when they're applying to jobs, when they're applying to other school programs, they can show this experience and show what they did during university other than just study. Obviously, a lot of students want to be well-rounded after coming out of university. They don't just want to have great grades, but they want to maybe have done cool things around the university, impacted the community, and done great things. So co-curricular record is a way to not only achieve that, but also prove it down the road. CLNX is just a website you really should check out after this session. So if you look up CLNX and University of Toronto, it'll come up right away, and you can log in using your UTR ID. You'll not only find a bunch of jobs, you'll also find volunteer opportunities, and you'll find workshops that you can attend, and a whole lot of things that are geared towards supporting students during their time at the university. Great. Okay. So everyone here is an international student. Hello, my friends. We have dedicated international transition advisors at the Center for International Experience, which I talked about in the last slide. So these are some wonderful things that they can help you with. They can help you navigate campus, resources, and supports. They can help you adjust to life at U of T, language and transition questions, building community, successfully communicating across differences, and then making an action plan. You can actually make appointments with these wonderful individuals on the CLNX and at the link right there. So if down the road or even today, you feel like you need to speak to someone or want to speak to someone with some questions about adjusting to life at U of T or any of these things on this slide, please, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to do so. They will happily sit with you virtually and talk to you and help you overcome whatever challenges you may be experiencing. Great. Supports for international students continued. Okay, so if you are a direct entry international student, so that means you are not in the International Foundation Program, the New College Office of Residence and Student Life, which we often call ORSL, is your first go-to. So Todd, who you met yesterday in the welcome video, is the assistant dean and is always very happy to chat with you. Perla is their health and wellness counselor, who's happy to talk to you about mental and physical health. They have an accessibility advisor. What that means, in case you haven't heard that term before, let's say at your prior school, you needed extra time on tests because of an accessibility concern. Or let's say something that literally happened to me in my first year. I broke my toe in my first year. Long story. And I couldn't walk to class because one of my classes was like way on the other side of campus. An accessibility advisor worked with me to get someone in my class to take notes for me and send them to me. I obviously still had to do all of the work, but it was a huge help because I no longer had to drag my broken toe and like in a lot of pain across the university. And like you said earlier, this university is pretty huge. It's a long way to walk. Learning strategists. So these are individuals who will be happy to learn and work with you to learn about study habits, to learn about setting a study routine, to learn about your schedule and what you should be doing with your time, and even how to take notes or how to prepare a presentation. All of these things that may be difficult, new, or certainly different in university, they'll be happy to chat with you about. And librarians. So at New College and all of U of T, but especially at New College because I love our librarians, they not only point out where the books are, but they're a really, really, really good resource for telling you where to start. So let's say you have an essay on how cold it is in Canadian winters. This is not going to be one of your essays, I promise you. But and you want to learn more about it, if you go to a librarian and just tell them, hey, I'm taking this course, I need to study this thing, I don't really know where to start, like what books to look at, what journals to read, whatever. You can speak to them and they'll help point you in the right direction so that you can get started. And they'll also be happy to meet with you down the road to see how you're doing. Obviously, everything is going to be virtual this year and they'll still be offering that service. All right, next. International Programs Office. So if you are in the International Foundation Program, hi. So first of all, Tyler, that's me, the guy with the hurt finger. I will usually be the first person you talk to for anything outside of academics. So if it's not about your homework or your classes, I'm usually one of the people you talk to. So whether it's about mental health, whether it's about getting involved around campus, whether it's about wanting to find a job during the summer or whatever it may be, I'm more than happy to chat with you. It's why I exist. It's why I get paid every day and I love doing it. Hannah is our programs advisor. So if you do have questions about your academics, she is absolutely someone you can turn to. Obviously, speak to your instructors. They will always be a great support for you. But Hannah can talk to you about study strategies. Hannah can talk to you about setting your routine so you're successful. She can talk to you about choosing your courses for next year even. She is kind of like the academic half of what we do if myself and Hannah are next to each other, and she's really wonderful and happy to support. Kendra, who is really great, is our coordinator. So whether you're trying to change your program or whether you have concerns about paying your tuition or kind of administrative issues, she's more than happy to talk to you and chat with you. If you sent us emails over the past few months as an International Foundation Program student, she's likely one of the people who respond to you, if not others. And then Lily is our assistant director. She's my boss. She's really great. And she's also happy to check in with you if you have higher level concerns with the program and so on and so forth. Great. So these are the people. All right. I wanted to plug this, or sorry, this Canadian term. I wanted to tell you about this. It's called MySP. So we talked all about all of this cultural transition that we're going to experience, right? And it can be emotionally and physically exhausting and pretty scary at times. So U of T has bought this service, essentially, and it means that all of our international students, even the ones who are not studying in Canada, have access to this service. What it is it's counseling. So you can chat online or over the phone in your preferred language, anytime, any day. So whenever you need support, let's say, I'll use my own example. So while I was in university, I once slept through an exam, which was a very, very bad day, and I got it sorted out, but I was freaking out. Like I was really scared, obviously. And so having this service could be really helpful just to have someone to talk to. I know at that time, I didn't exactly want to call my parents and be like, hey guys, guess what dumb thing I did today? I would have rather talked to someone who I don't have to feel bad to, I guess, or like feel guilty with, and just talk about what to do and just how my day is going, or just general mental health support. Mental health is really big on our campus. We really try to emphasize it. We know that being a student is not easy, and being an international student is certainly not any easier. So this is a wonderful, wonderful service that I really recommend. It's an app you download on your phone and you can access it whenever you like. Cool. So make sure to write down this uoftme/mySSP. All right. So that is the end of the content. Okay. So that is the content of the My Life in Canada. We talked a lot about cultural transition and what to expect and what you may experience. Obviously, there's things we didn't go into super detail about, but the reality is that a lot of this you'll have to experience for yourself, but we'll always have these supports that we talked about to help you. Now, I would love your input on some things. So here's my last time I'm going to ask you to do something for this thing. We have 3 sessions coming up. The first one is with head peer leaders. So these are students, upper year students, who will be volunteering to be leaders during the New Roots orientation. So that's the orientation for all new college students, not just international students, that takes place right after this one. So the leaders for that orientation will be meeting with us on Monday to answer our questions. So what I would love for all of these groups, but first these ones, is you to let me know if you have any specific questions for these people, whether it's about their experience, whether it's about the New Roots orientation program, whether it's about how to sign up, anything at all. Your questions, we'll make sure they get them. And that way we have them ahead of time before they start and they're prepared for the questions you might have. The next one, upper year international students. So these are second, third, fourth year international students who some have done the International Foundation Program, some have not. But we also have them joining us on Tuesday. This will be a recorded session, kind of like yesterday's. So we really, really need your questions ahead of time for this one, so we know what to ask them. Some of them are still studying internationally. Like one of them who used to be in the IFP that I was just talking to yesterday is still in Japan because they haven't gotten here yet. So it's not going to be a live session because they're all around the world right now. International students, who knew? And we need the questions ahead of time so that the things that they're answering actually matter to you. We want to make sure that what they're talking about matters. And then finally, the exact same thing, it's going to be recorded again with campus and club organization executives. So on Thursday next week, we'll be meeting with a bunch of presidents and vice presidents and administrators of different clubs and organizations at the University of Toronto, not just New College. And we want to know what you have for them. Do you want to ask how they got involved? Do you want to ask what they recommend for managing their time? Whatever it is, no question is wrong. Now, how you submit your questions, you can either send the private message to me, you could send it to everyone if you want, or you could go to the survey link right here. I put the QR code as well and the link. So if you want to do it right now while we're having our meeting, feel free. I see that some of you are doing that. Thank you very much. And then the rest of you, please feel free to submit it. Submit it via the link. Sorry, I just took it away. Right here. So I'll leave this up for a few seconds so you can either scan the QR code or write the link or write something in the messages. As well, I forgot to mention this, if you have any questions about this session, like what we just talked about, now is the time to either ask in the chat. There is also a place to ask that question in the link right here. And I have it open live so I can actually see the questions we're getting. Okay, so someone has asked, where can I get access to yesterday's video, which is the welcome video? Great question. What you can do is you can register for this orientation. It's possible that you just join this with the link because you saw the link somewhere. I know I posted it in WeChat and a few other places. But if you register for the orientation, then you can access the video. It will be on a website called Presence. With your registration will come all of that information. You'll receive it automatically via email. Amazing. So I'm getting a bunch of questions here. Amazing. So someone asks, how do you actually navigate on CLNX? You know what? We're actually a little over, but you know what? This is important. I'm going to show you. So let me just pull it up and then I'll show you. Hey, okay. So it's at the top, it'll say, welcome your name. I haven't applied to a job for a while, so everything's pretty empty for me. So what you'll see on the left, I'm not going to go super deep into it because we don't have that much time, but you'll see co-curricular record, and you'll be able to manage your own, you'll be able to search for opportunities, and you'll be able to learn more with frequently asked questions. Same thing for jobs and recruitment, on campus, volunteer, work study jobs, there's mentorship, and then finally, there are events and workshops, which is where you would sign up with a transition advisor and sign up for a whole bunch of other workshops. So it's all on this page. Again, it's clnx.utoronto.ca, or if you just search CLNX U of T or CLNX University of Toronto, whatever, you will get it. It'll come right up. All right, so finally, contact information. If you want to contact the new college, oh goodness, it's not there. New residents, okay. So I will type it in the chat. The Office of Resident Student Life, you can reach via email. Todd LeBlanc, you can reach via email. Ourselves, you can reach via email. And then myself, you can reach via email. These are the emails that you can contact us with. And then that is it. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone, today. It's been really wonderful talking to you all and seeing some of your faces and getting your feedback on what you're feeling right now. Yeah, it's been really great. Thank you, and I will see you soon.